It's Debate Night 2016. Live from the Doty Center at Great Lakes Christian College. The representatives for our three candidates will face off tonight in a battle of wits, ingenuity, and plain old common sense. Vote Roth. Vote Kane. Vote Grayson. Who will rise victorious come Election Day? This broadcast is made possible by SSI News on Location. Now, your moderator for tonight, SSI President James Muffett.
Student Statesmanship Institute. This is being live streamed, I think, out over the whole wide world. So we're excited that you guys get a chance to stand up and advocate for the candidates for governor that you have been supporting all week. This will be a debate very similar to a real debate in that the questions are going to be asked by a panel of media folks, but each one of these tables represents a different candidate. The Maple Party is representing, your candidate is Mr. Grayson, and the Oak Party, your candidate is Mr. Roth, that's the middle table, and the Willow Party is Mr. Kane on the far side over there. And so these are the surrogates of the candidates. Candidates are not here this evening, as you can see. So they will be answering questions and making statements, and each one of you who are students in this program this week will be allowed to vote for the candidate that you think should be the next governor of the state of Michigan. All right, so from the Maple Party, representing Mr. Grayson is Jocelyn Nelke. Raise your hand when I call your hand. Your name, Jacob Belanti, Abby Hester, and Micah Carabalese. And then we have the Oak Party, that's in the middle, right? Josiah Denoyer, Gabrielle Tice, Genevieve Brown, and Jacob Hester. And then we have the Willow Party is Chelsea Lloyd, Mandy Jaster, Nikolai Murphy, and Timothy Kendow. All right, let's give these guys a hand before we get started. And then also tonight we have a panel of distinguished media who are going to ask the questions of the various candidates. We have Mr. Zach Weston, who is a local Baptist pastor and editor of Christianity Today, right there. Give Zach a hand. All right. And we have Zeke Talmadge, who is with the Wall Street Journal Online. And we have Claire Convis from the most distinguished media, the SSI Observer. Okay, very good. All right, so the way this is going to work is we do have question cards so that if you, as a part, we'll have an audience question and answer period later. So if you, as a member of the audience, want to ask a question of one of the three parties, you can write that question down on some cards. Who has the cards? You've already been passed them out, so you can use those. And at the end of each round, you can pass those down, and we'll have people collect those at the end. Then also, for the members of the campaign teams, you will have 1 minute each for introductory remarks and 1 minute each for closing statements. And then each questions period will ask questions, and then you can answer them, and there will be a timer down there, and you know that. But if your opponents, you wish to challenge one of their statements, you can challenge for 1 minute each. Each party gets 3 challenges. So that means you can do 30 seconds to challenge the statement of another candidate or campaign, and then that candidate will have a chance to do a rebuttal of 30 seconds as well. So you only have 3 of those, and those can only come during the press question period of time. Okay? So everybody, you all ready? Yes, sir. All right. Our first thing will be the opening statements, 1 minute each. We'll go with Micah Carabalese first, who is supporting Mr. Grayson with the Maple Party.
In a world where students are lacking the education they need to succeed, in a world where we see our freedoms being taken away, in a world where our hard-earned money is being wasted on unnecessary, inefficient programs. Michigan citizens see the need for change now more than ever. Lieutenant Governor Gary Grayson stands strong to protect and fight for the individual. Grayson knows what it's like to have nothing and rely on hard work to succeed. He is guided by his spiritual convictions to protect the rights that God intended for you to have. He sees the problems that you are facing, and he can and will fight for you and help resolve the problems our state faces today. Michigan needs reform, and with the moral convictions and vast experiences Lieutenant Governor Gary Grayson has, he is the man that will get the job done and provide a strong foundation for Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we'll hear from Genevieve Brown, who is representing the Oak Party, who will be supporting Mr. Roth for governor.
Brian U. Roth is a businessman with a plan. He is a caring, professional, hardworking Christian businessman, father, and husband. With his business background, Mr. Roth has plans to save us money, including lowering taxes, which Jacob will explain more in depth. He knows that finances are important since he has been successful in both of his business and accounting jobs, including being president and chief operations officer in the Erie Corporation. Education issues are high on his priority list. He understands what goes into schoolwork, being that he has 3 degrees from Michigan State University. Also, because he and his wife Jane homeschool their 4 children, he wants to ensure the freedom of homeschool, private, and charter schools to be free to educate how they choose. Brian Roth worked with 2004 Governor Tom Wayne as the chair of the Michigan Economic Corporation, which has spurred a passion towards creating jobs in Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now for opening statement for Mr. Kane will be Chelsea Lloyd from the Willow Party.
Good evening. On behalf of our candidate, Jeffrey O'Kane, we'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. Born in Oakland County in 1968, Jeffrey Kane of the Willow Party is a former high school and college history teacher. From 2000 to 2014, Mr. Kane has served in the political realm as a county clerk for 7 years and as a member of the Michigan House of Representatives for another 6 years. Gaining expertise, Jeffrey Kane is willing to go and serve for the people and do what it is right for the people of Michigan. He believes in standing up for better education of our students and changing of different issues, preservation of states' rights, and finding the solution to Flint's water crisis. Hopefully, you will be informed tonight by our platform, and we hope that you gain the expertise you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to go into the question period, and each candidate will have the ability to outline their position on the issue, and then the media panel will ask questions. So the first one we're going to do is what's called project labor agreements, whether or not unions must be hired for state contracts or public contracts. And so we have, first of all, Jacob Valenti giving the opening statement for Mr. Grayson on that issue.
As you know, whenever the state of Michigan wishes to pursue any type of construction project, whether it be at a city, county, or state, they must hire a unionized company. However, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a unionized worker earns at least $200 more a week than non-unionized workers, and this is increasing the dollars paid to the state. Gary Grayson believes that this is tax dollar abuse. He plans to make the city, county, and state construction projects open to any non-unionized corporation as long as they follow state and government regulations. This ensures that the unionized companies do not have an unfair advantage on government programs. It also ensures that Michigan taxpayer dollars will not be wasted on inefficient systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can stay right there. And then we'll have also a statement from the Roth Party, the Roth candidate, Gabrielle Tice, will give their statement on this. And why don't we have Mandy Jaster come on up so you're ready for the next time. Very good.
Brian U. Roth strongly supports the bill that prohibits PLAs. He believes that PLAs create an unfair and unnecessary bias to union companies and their workers. For example, if a non-union worker was hired by a union company yet wanted to stay out of the union members would most likely bully the boss into firing the non-union member, as it could be a position taken by a union member themselves. This makes it impossible for anyone outside of a union to get a job with construction in this sense. With this bill, both union and private companies have the chance to bid on construction projects. This increases competition, gives private businesses as well as non-union workers the same chance as any union business.
Okay, thank you very much. And now Mandy Jaster from Mr. Kane from the Willow Party.
Jeffrey Kane is for equality among the people, all the people in the state of Michigan. He strongly supports the prohibition of the project labor agreement because of his stance on people's equality. PLA opposes that equality. As it stands, PLA dictates that government contractors can only pick a building company established in a union. Therefore, any private company that wants to receive a government contract simply cannot unless they join a union. This is simply not fair to private companies and government contractors who might want to hire a non-union company, but can't. This unfair law will be prohibited if Jeffrey Kane becomes governor.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Now we've got the panel questions, and each one of you will have to stay there, and then you'll have 45 seconds to answer the question. And again, if you want to challenge something the other person says, sounds like all three candidates are in agreement on this. And I think what we'll do, for the sake of time, if we could ask the audience to hold applause until the end of each section, and that way we can all applaud and we can keep this thing going. So the first one will be a question from Mr. Zach Weston, who's with Christianity Today. Mr. Weston?
Thank you. My question comes, since there is so much agreement on wanting to get rid of these PLAs, how will you protect the rights of workers? Because it sounds like from everything you've said, the statistics you quoted of $200 more per week, the way you described unions as bullies, it sounds like everything about this is really trying to drive down worker wages and provide, yes, a more competitive experience for some small businesses, but really this seems to hurt the workers of Michigan. So how do you plan going forward to protect their rights, even as you remove some of the project labor agreements?
Okay, Jake, if you get to go first, and then Gabrielle, and then Mandy.
Well, though the rights of these labor workers are very important, we need to look to the rights of everyone. And though unions will no longer have a monopoly on government jobs, there is no restriction to other jobs they may compete for so that their workers can keep their jobs and keep making their money. This program will be even more fair by allowing all workers to be able to compete for government jobs, including labor union workers. And they will all be able to compete equally for state construction projects.
Okay, thank you very much. Gabrielle Tice for Mr. Roth.
Well, Mr. Roth believes that there should be equality for everyone, not just the workers of the union. Therefore, getting rid of PLAs will create equality for everyone. The rights of the workers are important, but there are other workers who want to work on these projects. So if the PLAs are removed, this gives them the chance.
Okay, Mandy Jaster for Mr. Kane.
You asked specifically about wages. With PLA being prohibited, then union workers who mainly get government contracts also can do normal contracts, which they could anyway. But now they have more time to do that because some private companies will also be being hired for the government. So everything is just spread around more evenly rather than cut in half.
Okay, second question, Mr. Weston.
Is it possible, though, that without the parameters of working with unions, working with companies that are very well established in these fields, and just opening it up to anyone, that with this, all of a sudden, this complete liberty, this complete freedom in the marketplace, we are going to have a lot of cronyism, a lot of corruption, a lot of favoritism in the awarding of these contracts?
Okay, again, Mr. Belanti.
Well, I don't believe so, but around the time the bill was passed in Congress, unions were very influential and important in the economy, and they also provided safety and quality standards that most ununionized companies didn't offer. But in the modern economy, all companies usually abide by the same standards and regulations just as unions do. And in some cases, they abide to a higher level even.
Very good. Madam Tice. Call her representative.
Mr. Roth believes that getting rid of PLAs will promote no favoritism whatsoever. This will actually get rid of the favoritism that has been put in place by PLAs. While unions have in the past been to create a bubble of safety around workers that were being mistreated, it has now become a tactic to have the workers get what they want from the boss. Getting rid of this takes one step in getting rid of that bullying tactic.
Okay, and then Mandy Jaster for Mr. Kane on cronyism.
The PLA being prohibited will open it up for the two different kinds of companies. That does not mean the government contractors have to pick the private company now. They still have free reign to choose whichever one they feel best fits their work. That does not mean that the private companies may be better, they may be worse. It's just up to them to pick who they believe is best.
Okay, very good. Great answers. Let's give these three a hand for that round of questions. Thank you. Okay, y'all may be seated. Now we're going to have the next question. I'm going to call all three of the names of the ones to come up, and then you can give your statements on the issue, and then the questions can come. So we'll have Jocelyn Nelke, Jacob Hester, and Nikolai Murphy come to the stands, please. This question will deal with budget priorities for each one of the candidates for the state of Michigan balanced budget. We'll start with Jocelyn Nelke representing Mr. Grayson.
Lieutenant Governor Gary Grayson was very influential in the Financial Services Committee when he served as a state representative for 4 years. Grayson plans to hire a financial consultant to go into government-funded programs to ensure that your tax dollars are being put to good use and to better the programs with the funds that they already have, saving you money. If you elect Gary Grayson, he will save you your hard-earned money. How? By allowing the government to select a private company to go to work opposed to a government-mandated union. As of now, taxes are used to pay union workers, which are higher priced than most companies by approximately $200 a week. This equaling in a tax cut for the citizens of Michigan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For Mr. Roth, Jacob Hester.
Brian U. Roth would have a three-step process when it comes to the budget of Michigan. First, he'd be cutting property taxes by reducing mill rates by 13%. This would be saving $2.5 billion a year back to property owners, which are your parents. The second part would be that only Michigan right now, Michigan's prisons, have a practice of holding prisoners past their sentence rate. So if they were sentenced for 5 years, they are holding them to 6 years. This is costing $280 billion a year in your tax money. We'd be changing this, Brian U. Roth would be changing this to only holding these prisoners to their original sentence. Again, this would be saving the number $280 billion a year of your tax money. Moving to the third point under his process would be to set up work programs in these prisons. Now, what this would do would it would equip the prisoners with skills such as landscaping and lawn care skills to be able to get a job once they get out of prison. Again, he is for people and helping them out, and this is why he proposes this plan if elected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Mr. Murphy for Mr. Kane.
Mr. Kane was a former teacher, prospective educator, former Representative Kane. He wants to mainly work on the education. That was his big point on school aid and Michigan Department of Education. He wants to make sure money is going to the right spot and not just being wasted in some random spots. He also wants to trim down the budgets and overall and make sure all of the departments are getting what they need, but nothing more at all. He also wants to work on having fair taxes. As a rich person, he thinks that it is not proper to have higher taxes just because you're rich. And he also believes that even though you're in the lower income citizens, they don't believe that you should raise taxes either. He wants to make sure that each business higher society and lower society pays the same amount of taxes. Mr. Kane believes in having a balanced budget and also not increasing taxes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the opening statements. Now we'll have questions from Mr. Zeke Talmadge from the Wall Street Journal Online.
What are your budget priorities of your candidate, and how will you implement them into a balanced budget?
Starting with Jocelyn Nelke.
Our budget priorities for Mr. Grayson is to save you money as an individual. His long-term goal is to be able to give tax cuts. This fits into the budget very well. As of right now, taxes are already raised, so if we were to lower taxes, then this would not affect any type of budget plan because we would be putting them towards better usage in the government and possibly lowering them all around in an area.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hester, answer on that question.
So as well, Brian U. Roth is trying to save you money as well as Michigan's government. Now, how he's going to do this, again, was by cutting the property taxes. That's money back to you. However, that's money that the government is relying on of Michigan. So in order to fill that hole that is now created because you have more money in your pockets, we instituted, again, the Michigan prisoners, the practice, repealing the process of holding them past their sentence, and that money goes back to the government to fill that hole. Everybody wins.
Okay, thank you very much. And then also Mr. Murphy on the same question.
Mr. Kane, his priority is education, and a lot of the money that he looks into is for the education portion. But on cutting different budgets, we are looking into all of the different departments and seeing what we can cut, what they don't need, because each one of them has specific things that they need, absolutely need. But then there's the extra space in between them that they don't need, and that is what we're wanting to trim. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Zeke has another question.
Yeah. So if your candidate plans to raise taxes, how does that help? And how would work programs help lower that? Help in, for that matter.
Can you say that question again?
I'm sorry. If your candidate plans to cut property taxes.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. How does that really help?
Okay, how does cutting taxes help?
This is just for me.
Jocelyn Nelke first. We'll go left to right, and then you can challenge if you want. Sorry.
Mr. Grayson plans to give the tax cut in the area that we're not sure on the percentage yet, but in the area that goes towards the union workers, as like I stated, there is $200 that is put into that weekly that the government mandates that they have to use a union as of right now to work as that. So this would just be lowering that tax. You would be saving approximately $200 a week. That would be lowering your taxes. Thank you.
Okay. Jacob Hester.
After doing research, we found that currently we spend or the government receives $19 billion in tax revenues from property owners right now. Our plan would be to cut this property tax down to $16 billion. So this would be saving roughly $3 billion back to your pockets as property owners. As far as the work programs go, or the work programs rather go, this is for the individual sakes of the criminals who are in prison. Once they get out of prison, they often have that on their record, so it makes it harder to get a job. So what it would be doing is be helping the individuals in this case, because he's all about people. So once they get out of prison, they will have a skill trade to be able to go out and offer.
Okay. Then we also have Mr. Murphy.
As Mr. Kane I said before, he is more focused on the education budget. He really believes that making sure that the education budget is at the highest it can, but by lowering the taxes, we can make sure that all the other departments have the right things that they need. But lowering taxes will also allow people to go out and spend more money, which means they're spending more money, which means the government gets more money, which means more revenue to us. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Let's give them a hand for a good round of questions. Okay, now we're going to get into a controversial subject, which is the state legislature dealing with the DPS Detroit Public School bailout. We have Abby Hester for Mr. Grayson, will be Gabrielle Tice, Mr. Roth, and Chelsea Lloyd for Mr. Kane. And our panel question will be Zeke again? Okay. Wait a minute. Opening statements first. Abby Hester. All right. On this issue of DPS bailout.
Thank you. When it comes to being an architect of change, I don't know of any more effective blueprint than education, unquote. The city of Detroit has long been in shambles, which has greatly affected the school system. Detroit schools have the worst test scores in the nation and the worst graduation rates. The time to take action is now. Grayson realizes that education is the most important tool for shaping the future. While he agrees that the funds given to the city by Governor Snyder were necessary, the problem is that this was not fixing the root problem in Detroit. It was simply a temporary solution. Grayson's plan is to appoint committee members from the surrounding school districts to help advise Detroit, and also to appoint a state representative to oversee the efficiency of your money being used there. Thank you.
Okay. We then have Gabrielle Tice for Mr. Roth.
The DPS, or Detroit Public Schools, received $617 million to bail out their debt. Brian U. Roth is in full support of relieving the DPS debt and would start working with the Chief Financial Director of the Detroit Board of Education to make sure this won't happen again if elected. His strong support of this decision comes from his time in homeschooling his children and his knowledge of how important education and finances are. If he believes that the current Chief of Financials is not well enough equipped, he would appoint a person he trusts and knows could handle the job well. No matter what, though, he'd make sure to continue to work alongside the Detroit Board of Education to make sure this does not happen again. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And then Chelsea Lloyd for Mr. Kane.
In the unfortunate circumstance that is the DPS system falling into debt, Jeffrey O'Kane is highly invested in the education of not only just Michigan students, but also the students in Detroit too. That is why he is in support of the $670 million payment to help the city both pay off its debt and to help invest in student achievement. However, due to the mismanagement in the past system in the district school board, he is very adamant about making certain that before any money goes to the city, that the corrupt members of the school board will be replaced with competent people who are able to take accountability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, questions from Mr. Talmadge.
Does your candidate believe that the state is responsible for the current debt of the Detroit Public School, and why?
Okay, we'll start with Abby Hester. Yep, go ahead.
That's an excellent question. And no, Lieutenant Governor Gary Grayson does not believe that the state is to blame. The city of Detroit has been failing for years in many different ways. It has lost 57% of its population since the 1960s. The problem with the Detroit schools lies within the city and the past corruptions that its management and its politicians has brought upon it. And so the school system is not the fault of the state, but yet the state needs to step in and fix it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Gabrielle Tice for Mr. Roth.
Mr. Roth believes that while the state is not responsible for the debt of the Detroit Public Schools, he believes that this could have stopped a catastrophic spending much later in time. If the Detroit Public Schools was left to go bankrupt, we would have ended up costing $2 billion instead of $617 million. With this fix, we prevented a much more drastic fix in the future.
Okay, Chelsea Lloyd for Mr. Kane.
Well, Mr. Kane definitely believes that the state itself is not to blame, since roughly about the 1950s, in line with several political events that were going on in the city at the time, the public school system started to take a downturn from there. So he believes that it has been more so linked with the city's decline and the rise of corruption. However, he does believe now that it is up to the state to go ahead and come in and stand in and do what's right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good answers.
All right, so if your candidate does not believe that it is the fault of the state, then why does he feel it is both important and necessary to bail out the Detroit Public School?
Okay, Abby first.
The deal is education is one of the most important investments that our state and country can make, because education is what will shape the future. And though the Detroit public school system crisis is not the fault of the state, in this situation, it is the responsibility of the state to step into this problem and help. And under Mr. Grayson's specific plan, it is the local school district leaders that will form a committee and help advise the city of Detroit with the oversight of a few government and state-appointed officials. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Gabrielle for Mr. Roth.
As I mentioned earlier, the spending of the $617 million prevented spending $2 billion that the state would have ended up paying anyways. This fixed something that, although it may not be a permanent fix, it prevents a catastrophic spending later. However, our candidate will work with the Detroit Board of Education to make sure that this is not a repeat in history.
Okay, very good. And then Chelsea Lloyd for Mr. Kane.
As a former educator, Mr. Kane definitely believes in the education of our children, which is why it is that as soon as he heard about the situation in DPS, he is very adamant in making certain that even though countless mistakes and abuse has come along to get the system to where it is, he is determined to reach out a helping hand and make certain that they can do whatever possible. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Let's give these ladies a hand for great answers on that question. Now we're going to deal with the broader issue of education philosophy in general. Jacob Belanti will represent Mr. Grayson. Genevieve Brown will represent Mr. Roth. And Nikolai Murphy will represent Mr. Kane. And you have 45 seconds for opening statements on this issue of broad education philosophy. Jacob Belanti will go first.
All across the country, students and teachers are struggling with the government-designed curriculum known as Common Core. Common Core asserts that our students are one-size-fits-all and has shown that through its design. Michigan students are unique, and each individual has different needs and different learning styles. That's why the Lieutenant Governor, Grayson, believes local communities should have the freedom to choose the education best fitted to their students. But Common Core isn't the only problem. No Child Left Behind has hurt many students by pushing them along through lower grade levels without, in some cases, even having fundamental reading skills by the time they reach high school. Gary Grayson stands for the individual student and what is best for them.
Okay, very good. Opening statement from Genevieve Brown for Mr. Roth.
As I stated in the opening, Brian Roth wants to bring freedom of choice to Michigan public schools on what curriculum they can use by giving the choice to the districts. Under his government, he will allow each school district to either keep the Common Core curriculum or change it to a different curriculum of their choosing, secular or faith-based. All schools would have their own type of yearly testing and would still participate in standardized tests such as the SAT or ACT. Mr. Roth also would return taxes to each taxpayer who is not enrolled in public schools. While this would be money the state is not receiving for the school system, that 7% won't leave any huge impact.
Okay, very good. And we also have Mr. Murphy for Mr. Kane.
Jeffrey Kane is an educator and a professor. He believes in the educational choice is a big thing in Michigan and is a very important issue. Jeffrey O'Kane believes in getting rid of Common Core and should replace it with allowing the district to choose what they want instead of having a mandated Common Core. Mr. Kane also believes that we should not have the voucher because it should be the parents to decide where they should go. And if they do have financial problems, they should go up to the school and talk to them and find out how to fix the financial problem themselves. Also, Mr. Kane also wants to endorse the idea of STEM programs. Classes encourage students to open up the doors for more opportunities and also give an edge on applying to colleges. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, on this question, we have Claire Convis, who will, from the SSI Observer, be asking questions.
So if you're going to replace Common Core, what exactly would your candidate replace it with?
Okay, Mr. Belanti.
All right. Lieutenant Governor Grayson is planning on incorporating some of the former curriculums, both used and improved as long as they're approved by the state of Michigan. These curriculum have worked well in the past, both for the teacher and the student. Although these are successful curriculums, they will need to be updated in order to accommodate today's students. However, the first thing that Gary Grayson would be doing about Common Core when he's in office would be to reduce the immediate damaging efforts of Common Core.
Okay, very good. Also on that issue, Genevieve Brown.
As I said before, he would change it, and each district gets to decide. So the district can come up with a new program, and the school board has to decide if they accept that new curriculum, and it can be faith-based or secular-based. It does have to have some kind of yearly they have to have finals testing and midterm testing like the Common Core curriculum does currently.
Okay, very good. And then also Mr. Murphy.
So just like I said before, we want to replace it for the districts. The district can choose what they want. They can keep Common Core if it's working for them. They could also change it to a faith-based. They can also have cyber schools if they like. We'll learn online. It's up to the districts on how they would like to do it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Follow-up question?
Does your candidate show any favoritism towards the STEM program as opposed to other school subjects such as arts, languages, literature, and social studies?
Well, that's a really great question, thank you. But as of right now, I don't really have a strong answer to that. The Lieutenant Governor has definitely looked into this issue and will continue to look into it in the future. But as for now, he does not see this issue as important as the ones we have already addressed. Thank you.
Okay, so STEM, Genevieve Brown.
Brian Roth believes that the STEM program, as it is important, the science, technology, engineering, and math, as he is a businessman and accounting as part of his job, it is not all students need to be well-rounded in all education. So they need the arts, which schools are cutting back on, and they need the English so they can communicate, and the history so they have the knowledge of past. So he believes in keeping everything well-rounded.
Okay, very good. And Mr. Murphy for Mr. Kane.
Well, Jeffrey O'Kane has been in education, and he also is a professor for a really long time, so he knows that STEM is very important. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is very important, but English, science, and arts are very important too. But the only difference between this and having just a regular curriculum is STEM is a specific topic on a student can choose. They don't have to choose it, but Mr. Kane is encouraging students to open up and try new things. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right, let's give them a hand. A great round of questions for them as well. Remind the audience that if you have questions you'd like to ask these guys, you can write them down and hold the card up, and one of our volunteers will come get that from you, and then we'll have a time a little later for audience questions. And remind the members of the campaign teams that you can rebut or challenge the statement of one of your opponents if you wish. All right, so the next question is going to be the big issue of states' rights, the state of Michigan's relationship with the federal government. Candidates have statements on this from Abby Hester, from Mr. Grayson's campaign, Josiah Denoyer from the Roth campaign, and Timothy Kandow from the Kane campaign. Abby Hester, you have the opening statement on states' rights.
Every day, we see our freedoms slowly being stripped away from us. We are losing rights that belong to the states and its citizens. The Founding Fathers designed our states to have their own sovereignty and retain their power. Yet, today, we are being forced to accept laws that our state has voted against. This needs to change. Lieutenant Governor Grayson will fight against this. He believes that each individual has the right to make decisions about personal choice matters and liberties for themselves. Grayson will work to define exactly which choices belong to the states, and then he will reinforce the power of the state to keep these rights protected from the federal government. It is very crucial that local communities get to decide what's right for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Josiah Denoyer for Mr. Roth.
Thank you. Brian U. Roth strongly believes that there is a fine line between distribution of state and federal rights, and that the states should not be able to simply reject a federal ruling just because they want to. Currently, the federal government has too much control of each and every state. Being the people-minded candidate that he is, Roth realizes that each state has a more personal and closer to home relation with its citizens than the federal government ever could. This means that the state government can make more accurate laws, resulting in a general raised level of contentment for the citizens. Roth believes that the people's choice is very important. Despite all this, Roth still knows that the federal government plays an important role and that he in no way wants to deny the federal government of its ability. Thank you.
Okay, very good answer. Mr. Kandau for Mr. Kane.
More and more, the federal government seems to be gaining more power from the rights of the state of Michigan. Being a representative from 2008 to 2014, Jeffrey Kane understands the importance of the local government and believes that the individual vote and voice is better heard at a state level. He believes in the importance of state rights and will work to the best of his ability to preserve them. Kane believes in the process of interposition, in which each state assumes the right to interpose itself between the federal government and the people of the state by taking action to prevent the federal government from enforcing laws that this state considers unconstitutional. If the judicial branch of the state votes that the law or the mandate created by the federal government is unconstitutional, the state has the right to claim interposition along with any other states who may agree. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have questions from Mr. Zach Weston.
This question is particularly relevant in light of a lot of the recent pushes, both from and against the federal government, relating to things like transgender bathroom use, marijuana legalization, and the Affordable Care Act, and Medicare, Medicaid expansion. So what's your plan for this relationship? A lot of you seem to want to push back against these things. Do you plan on just fighting the federal government? And what are the metrics you're going to use? Are you going to sue using judicial processes? Are you going to make the determinations of what's a state right and what's a federal right based on constitutional means, the state legislature, what voters mandate, your candidate's own personal opinion? How are you going to determine that? Because it sounds like you all want to change the current status quo.
Okay, Abby Hester for Mr. Grayson.
All right. Well, as it is illegal to actually deny a decision from the federal government, that is not the route that Mr. Grayson will be taking. And if we took it to the federal government, in most of the cases, the federal government wins against the state. So how are we going to help this problem? Mr. Grayson served as a state representative, and so what he's going to do is he's going to work with the House, and the Senate, and Congress in order to redefine the Constitution and lay a solid line of what rights belong to the state and what rights belong to the federal government. And once this is done, once it is clearly defined, the government will no longer be able to take away the state's rights. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Denoyer for Mr. Roth.
Roth strongly believes that states' rights obviously return directly to the 10th Amendment and what's defined in the Constitution. So as far as that goes, the state should not have to submit to the federal government if the federal government is not following the constitutional relation to that issue, particularly religion or many other issues. So basically, it's a matter of the Constitution and what is constitutional.
Okay, and then also Mr. Kandau for Mr. Kane.
Mr. Kane believes in really what the intention of the 10th Amendment was, to give the rights of the state back to the states. Now, the government has slowly creeping over the issues of, for example, the transgender bathrooms. Now, again, as I read in the introduction speech, he believes in the theory of interposition, which is essentially that if the government, or if the jury of Michigan sees that the federal government has overstepped its bounds of the U.S. Constitution, they have the right to mark a claim against it. This claim is essentially against the federal government, saying that we will not cooperate.
Okay, Mr. Weston, follow-up.
So each of you referenced the Constitution quite a bit in your statement, including the intention to redefine the Constitution. I don't see anything, though, about the executive having the power to redefine or reapply how the Constitution is handled. That seems to me like something that the judiciary handles. So what is your plan for your particular candidate going forward to change these things, since the Constitution isn't necessarily, redefining the Constitution isn't within his purview?
That is an excellent question, and allow me to clarify any confusion on this matter. what is going to happen if Mr. Grayson is elected is that the Constitution is not going to be changed, but it's going to be clearly defined. Right now, the line between states' rights and federal rights, it's a gray area, and it's hard to define. And this has allowed the federal government to creep into the states' rights and take over the decisions that should be made by the state and its citizens. So what's going to happen is these boundaries, this gray area, will be more clearly defined and described so that the states can hold on to the rights that were intended for them to have. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Mr. Denoyer for Mr. Roth.
Simply restating what I said, he would not in any effort redefine the Constitution, simply follow what is already in place. And if it was necessary to in any way do that, if worst came to worst, he could personally work with the judiciary system. And if that's what had to happen, he would definitely be the kind of man who would be willing to put in his time and effort to do that. Thank you.
Okay, and then finally, Mr. Murphy for Mr. Kane. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Kandow for Mr. Kane. My bad.
Again, we must look at really the intentions of the 10th Amendment. The whole intentions were to give the states their rights. This is why it was written. And Mr. Kane believes in it. And once again, the federal government is slowly creeping over into that. And this is something that my candidate, Mr. Kane, will not put up with. This is why he has created this the interposition theory, and which is essentially that whether the federal government crosses over their boundaries, that we will stand up with other states who also agree with us. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I believe that's it for that round of questions. Let's give them a good round of applause. Well done. All right, the next issue is another major controversial issue in the state of Michigan, which is the Flint water crisis. You now have 45 seconds per party for opening statements. Mr. Carabalese will be for Mr. Grayson, Mr. Denoyer for Mr. Roth, and Mandy Jaster for Mr. Kane. Micah Carabalese, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Water is one of life's most precious resources. Flint's water crisis began in 2014 when residents started realizing the issue with the water. Health inspectors informed the city officials that there could be a problem with the water, but they decided to ignore the issue. When they disclosed the case to Governor Schneider, they never mentioned that they were warned. Lieutenant Governor Gary Grayson would have made sure the health inspectors would not only report to the city officials the issue with the water, but also the state. If Grayson was Governor Schneider's shoes, he would have taken more precautionary measures before switching the water, which could have saved a city full of illness and turmoil. We need a governor that will be more proactive and less reactive towards these crises. A governor like Gary Grayson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Denoyer for Mr. Roth.
Yes, in regards to the Flint water crisis, Roth would have definitely handled the situation differently. Here's how. In the first place, he would have absolutely made sure that Flint's officials were trustworthy and consistent, because the problem in Flint didn't really begin when lead was found in the water, but when faulty officials neglected to complete their duties. Secondly, as soon as Roth found out about the problem, he would have further investigated it and discovered what the best option would have been. That would have meant either switching water sources, either back to the previous Detroit location or another source, possibly replacing the lead-infected pipelines, or giving the people of Flint immediate help with water filters and test kits. Regardless of the decision that Roth made, it would have been enacted in the fastest, most cost-effective way possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Mandy Jaster for Mr. Kane.
Our candidate, Jeffrey Kane, realizes that the Flint water crisis is a very unfortunate situation. He believes that the blame predominantly lies with the Flint emergency manager who switched from the clean Detroit water to the more chlorine-filled Flint River, and that the blame also lies with the workers who failed to put the proper minerals into the new water. If Jeffrey Kane had been governor, he would have taken care of the crisis at the first sign of problems instead of waiting. As the crisis is already in motion, Mr. Kane would continue with the current Governor Snyder's solutions, both long-term, replacing the pipes, and short-term, passing out water bottles and filters to Flint households.
Okay, very good. We have questions from Claire Convis from the SSI Observer.
What is your candidate's position on the current measures being taken by Governor Snyder to remedy this crisis?
Micah, you can go first. You just go right across.
What is the position? Sorry.
Repeat the question. Loud.
Sorry.
Loud. Speak loud.
What is your candidate's position on the measures being taken by Governor Snyder currently to remedy the Flint crisis?
Well, we believe that's a good question. And Governor Snyder's plan, which is a 75-point plan that I don't have time to recite, have procedures that I think are great towards getting the Flint back up on its feet. One thing that I noticed about his plan is that he doesn't have a plan to block all of the lead pipes, like airlines or the services. But if Grayson was elected, he would make sure that those pipe airlines or services would be blocked.
Okay, very good. Mr. Denoyer for Mr. Roth.
In Roth's opinion, Governor Snyder did a fairly good job of handling the situation. If you look at how exactly the Flint water crisis happened, the amount of time between when the officials found out there was lead in the water and when Governor Snyder found out there was lead in the water was a fairly large amount of time, more than 6 months. The amount of time between when Governor Snyder heard about when there was lead in the water and when he started doing something about it was less than a month. So I think he responded in a very, very timely fashion, especially in comparison to the officials. Thank you.
Okay, Mandy Jaster for Mr. Kane.
To clarify, Governor Snyder can't just switch the water because the calcium deposits were eroded and the lead is now completely leaching in no matter what water you put in. Therefore, he is already replacing pipes, which will be a relatively lengthy process, and he is passing out water bottles that have been donated from all around the country and filters, and many urgent cares around the Flint area are offering free lead tests for anyone who is concerned.
Okay, very good. Follow-up question?
In your candidate's opinion, with whom does the blame lie? With the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Flint officials, Flint contractors, or the governor?
Okay, where does the blame lie?
Well,
Mr. Carabalese?
As I said, the blame lies mostly among the Flint city officials, since they did not say to the governor that they were warned by the health inspectors.
Okay. Mr. Denoyer.
Roth also believes that it was definitely the officials' fault that the Flint water crisis was not brought to the attention of the governor earlier. They neglected to report 2 lead levels that would have been much above the state required level. And also, if Roth had been in that position, he would not have allowed officials to be in the position where they had to make those kind of reports if they were not trustworthy and reliable people. Thank you.
Okay, Mandy Jaster for Mr. Kane.
There is a several-step process to who could possibly be at blame. First of all, the Flint officials, specifically the emergency managers, switched the water. But that water would have been fine if the workers had put the proper minerals in to keep the chlorine levels down. That would have kept the calcium from eroding and releasing the lead. The health inspectors then also withheld the lead test some lead test informations from the government, which would have helped the public realize it sooner. But I would have to say Flint officials.
Can I make a challenge?
You may make a challenge.
So this is at the Willow Party. You mentioned that the manager who was in charge of switching the water should have made sure that whatever the caution should have been taken. When the water was switched, it was in an effort to reduce spending. And this problem could have easily been adjusted right then if they had simply tested the water and seen if there was actually a large amount of lead in it, which there was. So what I'm wondering is if your candidate believes that the budget and the money involved is not worth trying to save, but also that he definitely should have tested the water.
Water tests could have been in order, but I have to say they took the easier route. Their 2 choices were switching the water or building new pipes right away. Building new pipes would be far more expensive, but they have to do that now anyway. And they switched the water, and again, if the minerals would have been put in, the calcium wouldn't have eroded off the really old pipes, the lead wouldn't have leached.
Okay, very good. Let's give these guys a round of applause for another good set of answers. Well done. Yep, there we had our first challenge. I liked that. That was well done. Okay, we now have a time for some audience questions. I know we have another one there, and we have some here. If you just want to give those to the ones you want to have asked, if you want to give those to one of our panel members and let them ask the questions. And I guess you all will be able to choose from your team which one will answer the question being asked. So as soon as you hear the question, one of you come up, and then we'll let you all three give an answer. As soon as we determine which questions we're actually going to ask. You always have to filter audience questions. Not that we don't trust you or anything.
The question is, what will happen to the kids and families in the Detroit public school systems?
Okay, what will happen to the kids and families in the Detroit public school system under your candidate's policies? We'll just go from this side to the other side and just answer the question for your candidate. Go for it.
As of currently, nothing will happen with the new plans to the students and families currently in the Detroit public school system. Yes, the schools will be improving and they will be changing for the better for these families and increasing the quality of education that these students will receive. But none of the families will be moved. The students will not have to change schools and uproot their current lives. They will be able to stay where they are placed currently, but yet enjoy the benefits of the education reforms that Mr. Grayson would implement. Thank you.
Okay, Gabrielle?
The plans that Mr. Roth has does not include affecting the students and teachers of the DPS. His plans are strictly for the financials, and this is in order to better the DPS.
Okay.
While Jeffrey Kane does want to make this process as painless as possible, he does realize that there may be just a little bit of change, but he wants to keep it as minimal as possible. So if that means keeping the kids in the schools where they are so that they do not have to track through dangerous neighborhoods to get to a school that is perhaps on the other side of town, he will do his very best to make certain that and treat the students to a better grade of education than they have been getting for the past several years.
Okay, very good. Follow-up question to that on that topic or a different question?
Different question.
Different question. Okay, you guys sit down. Second question.
All right, so this question is directed toward Jeffrey O'Kane, or your party. You mentioned when talking about the budget that you would take cuts from education that you were not absolutely needed. Would that mean that you would be cutting extracurriculars such as art or music?
So, Mr. Murphy, you can answer that question?
Yes, I am. So, it was just directed to me. Mr. Kane, when I said that, he is not cutting extra budgets. He's cutting extra expenses. So that doesn't include different classes like art, music, science, all those. He's just looking at the budget and seeing where it needs to be and that's it. It's not like he's not cutting actual budgets. He's looking at the way we can make it better. Thank you.
And as a follow-up to that, this actually came from another audience member, if you would. You did state that there were multiple departments that you wanted to take money from. I have all candidates come up for this one. Are there any specific departments you would like to cut? You mentioned a lot about vaguely saving money, but we need to be as specific as possible about this. So it is addressed to you, but if if both parties could come forward to answer this one as well. What specifically is what the audience wants to know?
Okay, so you can answer first for Mr. Kane, and then we'll have Mr. Grayson and Mr. Roth. What would you want to cut?
Yep. Basically, Mr. Kane went through the budget these last few days, and we were looking to see what departments would need to be cut. One of the biggest is human resources. People get food assistance, and it is 48% of the human resources, and that is why I'd like to cut that a little bit down, because people use more of that than they actually need, and they should be using their own money and getting the jobs to actually pay for that. So that is one of the biggest reasons why I want to cut on that one. Thank you.
Okay, Jocelyn from Mr. Grayson.
Mr. Grayson does not intend to cut any funds from anything. He simply plans to allow the government to hire private companies as long as union companies. So Mr. Grayson does not plan on cutting any funds.
Okay, budget will remain the same. Mr. Roth?
Mr. Brian Roth is, as I mentioned before, planning on cutting property taxes by 13%. This would bring in about $2.8 billion a year back into your parents' wallets. Now, to fill this hole, as I mentioned before, is the reforms within the prison would then fill that hole in the government's pockets. So, as I referenced before, everybody wins.
Okay, very good. Follow-up question or on budget or finance?
This also has to do with education. So people say that they're against Common Core, but what will your candidate do to ensure that once Common Core is gone, something worse than Common Core won't fill that void?
So how do you prevent something worse than Common Core?
Within our, Mr. Grayson believes that he will be able to implement that. You will be able to vote upon your curriculum that your child gets to use within your school district. So they will be able to vote upon and be able to look at the curriculum before voting upon the curriculum. Therefore, you know what your child is going to be learning and using in school.
Okay, very good.
With Mr. Roth, he is going to be, as I said before, he's going to give the school board a choice which people can go in and vote on in the community, and they get to choose what curriculum. They can come up with their own curriculum, secular or faith-based, or they can keep with Common Core. It depends on what fits the people's needs and wants for the system.
Okay, so more local control for Mr. Kane.
The way we would do it is in the districts. They would get to decide. I believe, well, Mr. Kane believes as an educator and a professor that the parents should be involved. They should be able to look at what their children are getting into and vote on it and decide what the curriculum they're going to be establishing in their schools.
Okay, very good. Education questions. Let's give them a hand for that. Good job. Do another one. You have another one? Okay. One more question.
I would like to circle back to a couple of the issues that were raised in answering one of the previous questions, and this is from an audience member, and it will be directed to the Roth campaign and the Kane campaign. So the
Roth,
specific question from the audience member was, isn't your policy of forcing prisoners to work essentially instituting slavery for criminals? And also, we fail to see how that plugs a $3 billion budget shortfall that you are projecting with your property tax cut. So the second part of that question will be to the Kane campaign. You propose cutting food assistance to take money out of the budget. You said you wanted to reduce the human resources budget for food stamps or social services of some kind. So I'm wondering if you could address, like, how are you going to enforce that without actually literally making Michigan citizens starve? So.
Okay, who wants to answer those questions from the Kane and Roth campaigns? And if someone from Grayson wants to weigh in on that, you're welcome. So, Mr. Roth first.
Okay, so in relationship to the slavery issue, this is actually not so. What I actually personally do landscaping myself. I do not consider slavery. It is actually helping the prisoners, again, as I mentioned earlier, to equip them with a skill so that once they get out of prison with a track record of being in prison, they will have a skill that they can offer to a local neighbor that they can offer for money. Now, relating to the how are we going to fill the $3 billion hole? Well, actually, we are going to be saving $280 billion in our prison plan amendment that we mentioned earlier. So that should definitely take care of it.
$280 billion is how much you'll be saving.
That would be a year, and that's from, again, the currently Michigan's prisons, unlike other states, they hold their prisoners in for extra years past the original sentence rate. So these extra years are costing them $280 billion a year. So what we are doing is making the prisoners only stay for the original sentence timeline that they were given. Again, we'd be saving $280 billion a year, minus the $3 billion that would go back to the government. That's $277 billion a year saved for the government of Michigan.
Okay, for Mr. Kane.
Could you repeat my question?
Certainly. You mentioned something about cutting something within human resources, as you put it, which is a state department that helps with employee services. But then you mentioned food assistance,
Yes.
social services that you want to cut as a way of reducing government waste?
Well, as you all know, people have food assistance, yes. It is an essential portion, to people who can't get a good enough jobs. But as we have seen in the past years, that food assistance has gone up. And it is 46% of that actual department, which is a little too much, in my opinion, and that's why I'm saying I want to see how much they need actually on food assistance and not just put a set price on it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's give them a hand for that set of questions. Are there more questions, or is that it? One more question, and then we'll have the final closing statements from the campaigns.
All right, so this is a topic that was not discussed tonight, but it's a pressing thing, and I'm sure that each candidate must have an opinion on this.
Okay.
In light of recent events, what is your candidate's view on gun control?
And this is totally spontaneous, so for Mr. Grayson.
Mr. Grayson believes that the current freedoms that we have in Michigan under the Second Amendment should remain untouched. But what Mr. Grayson is planning on doing is he is going to fight and support this freedom to where it will not be taken away from you. There are many freedoms that are under challenge right now, especially with the recent shooting in Orlando. It has been a big topic on the news recently, but Mr. Grayson strongly believes that citizens deserve the right to own a gun and protect themselves. Criminals will always have a way to get a gun. It will be the law-abiding citizens that are left defenseless if these freedoms are taken away. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Mr. Roth.
Mr. Roth believes that gun control is not needed. What he does believe is that everyone, as it's protected underneath the Constitution, says that everyone has the right to own a gun. And he believes that. He does still believe that you should have a permit for concealed weapons, and that tasers and they should be still free without you get a permit for them until more research is found for those.
Okay, and then for Mr. Kane.
As we look at the Second Amendment rights, this is also something that is slowly dwindling down as the U.S. federal government and also other local governments are trying to take away. However, Mr. Kane, who is now running for governor, he believes that it is the right of the citizens to own a gun. Now, he has read the statistics out there that say that when people own guns, they're less. When there's guns in a certain area, an open or a gunfire is less likely to happen. So he believes in the right of the guns. However, and he will continue keeping the current Michigan legislator, and he believes that Michigan is currently allowing citizens to own their guns while taking a license as well.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you guys. Good answers. Okay. We're now approaching the end of the debate, and I'm sure each one of these candidates would like for you to vote for their candidate. Final closing statements will be 1 minute each from Jocelyn Nelke for Mr. Grayson, Jacob Hester for Mr. Roth, and Timothy Kandow for Mr. Kane. Jocelyn Nelke can go first.
I ask you, fellow colleagues, are you ready for a change? Are you tired of the state wasting your hard-earned money? Fed up with fellow friends being left behind in school? Electing Gary Grayson will benefit Michigan not only in tax dollars, but better the people. Lieutenant Governor Grayson sees that your tax dollars need to be looked into to ensure that money is being put to good use. Grayson has witnessed students failing and falling behind due to government-mandated curriculum. Gary Grayson is ready for a change. Grayson has had to stand firm in what he believes and work towards his future. Are you ready to see a change in Michigan? Voting for Lieutenant Governor Gary Grayson, a strong foundation for governor of a wonderful state, will give you your freedom, better education, and your money. So stand with me, ready for Michigan, to stand strong in our freedoms and our foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hester for Mr. Roth.
First, on behalf of Brian Roth tonight, we would like to thank you all for coming and for listening to us and what we have to say. What's really cool about Roth is that he's the only candidate standing up here, or not standing up here today, but being presented today, that has both the political background as well as the business background. You have to have them both to be able to run as governor, effectively, that is. With a true heart's desire for Michigan, he's willing to serve, and he'd be incredibly grateful for your vote for him to become your next governor. Bottom line, if elected, Brian Roth would, for one, be creating jobs. 2, reducing property taxes as mentioned. 3, retaining individuals' freedom of choice to choose how and where they would like to be educated. And finally, he would restore the Detroit public schools because he believes that every kid deserves to have the equal opportunity to have an education which he believes in, as he is homeschooling his family and as he believes is most important in order to raise up citizens that can lead one day like themselves.
Okay, thank you very much. And then also Mr. Candow for Mr. Kane.
This evening we have heard many stances on many of the issues this evening. And now you, the voters, must decide who your next governor of this beautiful state of Michigan will be. Former representative and educator Jeffrey Kane has both the experience and the education to be your next governor on all of the issues, including educational choices, giving students a better education, and giving parents the right to teach them however they would like to. State rights, preserving the rights of the states, and Flint water, helping out those in Flint, and gun control, making sure that the citizens have their guns and their Second Amendment rights. He has never backed down, and with his life as evidence, he won't when he is your next governor. He won't back down, and he will press for your constitutional and God-given rights, liberty, freedom, because you and Michigan are worth something to fight for. Thank you.
All right, let's give those three a good round of applause. Great statements. Well done. All right, that concludes the debate. I see that our television panel is getting ready to go on with their commentary, which we'll be able to watch later. But let's take a minute now and thank our panel. If you all would stand up. Our media panel did a great job. Let's give them a warm round of applause. Thank you, guys. Well done. And also the representatives for Gary Grayson. Would you all stand? Let's give them a great round of applause. Stay standing. And the representatives for Mr. Brian Roth, if you all would stand, let's give them a round of applause. And the team for Mr. Jeffrey O'Kane, if you all would stand, let's give them a round of applause. All right, thank you all. You may be seated. That concludes the debate. I just want to remind the audience and all the voters that you have a big choice to make. You will be selecting tomorrow night during the election the next governor of the SSI state of Michigan. And I hope that you paid attention. And now you can take the next 24 hours. You can ask questions of the campaigns. You can donate money to the campaigns. And then you can also decide who it is that you want to vote for tomorrow night. So I hope you'll take your civic responsibility very seriously. And I want to thank you all for coming. That concludes our debate. Let's give them one more round of applause. Well done. Okay, that concludes the debate. Thank you very much.
So how do you guys think all three campaign teams have done thus far? Or first, how about just tell me just exactly which campaign teams that you guys have been, which ones have you guys been representing and reporting on?
I have been representing Willow, and they've been going pretty strong. They have been focusing a lot on education because of their candidate's background in education, being a teacher and everything. And I think they've been doing pretty good.
I've been mostly focusing on the Roth campaign. I think they started out pretty strong with their fundraiser the other day. I think they gained them quite a bit of support. And Mr. Roth has been mostly focusing on, I think, the budget because of his background as a businessman.
Okay. All right, and I've been doing Gary Grayson of the Maple Campaign, and so I'd say one of their biggest stances is education and just emphasizing that, the whole 5 districts with 5 different curriculums voted on by people of those districts, and so that's one of their main stances.
Have all 3 parties been really confident as they were moving closer to the debate?
Yeah, I think so. They seemed to have all their issues put together. Even yesterday in the press conference, they seemed very confident.
So all the teams, they pretty much, at their press conferences, they really gave great reviews on or previews about what they were going to present at the debate tonight.
Yeah, I think the Maple Party was pretty clear. I think they had their issues well thought out. They definitely had their top 3. I think they listed education first, gun control second, and then budget and gun control might have been flipped around. But they actually had a really interesting stance on gun control. They used the example of Switzerland, and everybody over the age of 18 in Switzerland is required to carry a gun. And they have considerably less, mass shootings, murdered by guns. And I think it's because of the fact that, if somebody says, okay, I want to go attack these people, but I'm surrounded by people who I know they all have guns, who's going to want to do that?
Yeah, who's going to want to try and attack someone when most likely
Exactly.
they'd be the ones to get
Yes,
attacked?
totally. But I mean, they're not saying that they would require everybody in Michigan to carry a gun, obviously. But I mean, just kind of the idea that people that carry guns really do dissuade others from wanting to attack.
Okay, so how did Maple Party do on that? I mean,
Oak Party, yeah.
Oak Party, yeah. Sorry, Oak Party.
On the gun control?
Yeah.
I actually am not quite sure how they did on the gun control issue, because from what I've covered, they didn't really address it all that much.
Okay. Did Willow address the gun control issue at all?
No, their 3 main points were educational choice, the Flint water crisis, and the states' rights.
So what about the Flint water crisis? There was a lot of talk about that during the debate. How do you think they all reacted towards that?
Here's the interesting thing. Every single one of them talked about what they would have done. But anybody can say what they would have done.
Yeah.
It's okay, I mean, I can say that my fictional candidate, if I just wanted to make one up right now, I could say, yeah, he would do all this, this, and this. But, I mean,
But that doesn't
I have
make it
no
so.
evidence to
Yeah.
back it up. So,
Right.
I mean, I thought they should have focused maybe a little bit more about what they were going to do to fix it in the future rather than what they would have done.
Yeah, because it's in the past, and if it's in the past, you can't really do
Exactly.
much about it.
Right, and I also think that what might have been, strategic or advantageous for them is if they had, an instant of their candidate, in his past where he had dealt with something that was similar to that, where he could, brought that up as, proof that, yeah, according to his history, he would have done this. And so I think all 3 candidates, or all 3 campaigns kind of slacked off a little bit in that regard.
Yeah. So what do you think were just the main, other than the Flint water crisis, what do you think was probably one of the other main just things that each team kind of got really heated in about for the debate?
I think the 10th Amendment issue, all 3 of them had some, they all didn't, want to separate from the federal government, but on some level or another, I think each one of them has a few issues. Like the Roth campaign stated that they would follow the federals, even if they were going against the Constitution, if I understood that correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't necessarily think that's right, but then at the same time, the Maple Grayson campaign said that if the Federals did go against the Constitution, that they would
kind of defy the
well, yeah, they would, for overstepping. But I mean, that is on some level or another correct, I think. But how do you define overstepping the Constitution, right? Like, whose place is that to do that?
Right.
None of them, they kept that as a gray area, I think, and they might have done a better job of defining that line of where the government is crossing the lines, instead of just, he's gradually been, the government has gradually been going and crossing the lines.
Yeah, because at first, when they first started, they really were pushing like the fact, even all of them almost agreed on the fact that they would try and redesign the Constitution, so to speak, and then they all had to go back and correct themselves.
Right. And one clarification I want to make, it wasn't the Grayson campaign that I was saying about overstepping. That was actually the Willow Kane campaign, so just a little clarification.
All right, so what do you guys think about the budget issue? I mean, every candidate had a very, very different stance on what they were going to do about it. So, I mean, what do you guys think?
I mean, like, the Grayson campaign, their whole thing with the budget thing is he was going to hand it off to someone else. Like, he was just going to hire a financial advisor just to have someone else be specifically targeted on that to watch it for him and just keep him up to date on it.
Right. And one thing I noticed is, I mean, when they're talking about, like, the Detroit school system and the debt with that is, they're saying, okay, it's been going downhill for a long time, but the state still has to fix it. But none of them ever talked about, how we're going to fix this.
Right, yep.
And then, go ahead.
I think that Willow was very vague on that area, and when they were confronted about it specifically, they said something about cutting human resources and the kids getting jobs, which I thought sounded like that didn't sound like a very good idea.
I mean,
because
honestly,
kids can't get jobs. Like, you have to be 16.
Right.
I was
thinking. And I think one of the things they were going for is like with how like some people, they do use the human resources just to get the money so they don't have to work. I mean, I can see where they were going with that, but they really should have been more clear if that's the point they were trying to make on like those people that like just use it so they don't have to work. If they would have been more clear on that, I think that point would have made more sense on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, what about people who are like helpless or they have disabilities and stuff like that? Then you're just ignoring that part of Michigan. You can say, okay, I'm for the people, but then if you say, okay, I'm for the people, just not these people, then you're kind of undermining your own stance.
And then for the Roth campaign, I thought it was kind of refreshing that they had a pretty specific 3-point budget.
Sure.
But I mean, the cut back on the property tax 13%. I think that's pretty good. The prisoner policy, withholding prisoners only to their sentence, I thought that was good. But the work programs, I thought that was, if a prisoner, if someone's in prison, they're there against their will, right? And then if they're made to work, that's forced labor practically. And what is forced labor but slavery?
Exactly.
So I'm a little taken back by that on the Roth campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we don't just want like a concentration camp for prisoners. And I think, okay, if they're there for rehabilitation, you want to be able to actually, like, okay, as soon as their term's up, be able to release these people basically back into society, and have faith that they're not just going to revert to all their old ways,
Right.
It's
I think that's a little bit kind of what they were thinking, but because I think it was Jacob Hester had mentioned, that this work will help them get jobs. But I mean, I think part of the slavery, kind of idea came from was, I think it was a quote that came from him, where he said, let's take the remote out of their hand and give them a ring. Right?
Yeah.
So that is, I think that's pretty blatant.
Oh, and here's the thing, is you can have them do as much manual labor as they want, but, I mean, there is a percentage of jobs that is manual labor, but a good percentage of jobs is working with people, too, So, I mean, I think the focus should be on rehabilitation, not just, okay, like, all this manual labor, this will be a good way to, get them acclimated.
Well, if they could have made their thing work in some way, just so they would get training. is if they would have been specific on like if they would have took the stance as in like more community hours, more community service hours, then that would be like it's something they should want to do in order to get out. So like if they don't do that amount of hours by the time they can have parole or something, they can't get parole right away.
Exactly.
I mean it runs into their like keeping them longer, but it still runs along with their wanting the work thing, just so they'll be more rehabilitated. It'll give them something else to do other than just sit around and just think about what they've done or what they might do again or something like that. So like just over like all three of you, what were probably just like the most main points from each of the teams that you guys have been watching? Like just the main points you saw in their debate. It doesn't have to be all from the same part of the debate, but what do you think was like the strongest point that each of your parties made?
Well, I mean, one thing that I noticed is that on education, basically all of them had almost the exact same stance.
Yeah, I think the only difference was the Grayson Maple campaign they wanted to have the formally approved curriculum instituted. I mean, not instituted as in for the whole state, but just for the districts or whatever, right? So I think that was the only difference between them all. Was the Grayson campaign had their specified curriculum that they would allow the state districts to use, whereas the other two campaigns had you can choose whatever you want.
So I mean, and one question I had about that is, okay, so if you do have your 5 districts in Michigan, then it's like, okay, so what if parents really don't like the district they're in? It's like, are they just kind of stuck with that one? Are they going to send their kid an hour and a half, 2 hours out of their district into another one just to go to a different school? You do have choice, but you also, if everybody's doing the same thing, it's essentially just like Common Core, just spread out over 5 different, regions.
I liked where they were going with like the idea that maybe some public schools could have like Christian-based or even like Catholic-based just school curriculums, but again, they would run into an issue like that. As much as that idea sounds awesome, you run into the issue that not every parent's gonna want like just Christian programs in a school.
Well, but I think that just goes back to the old idea that you can't please everyone.
Exactly, and then you do have freedom of choice too. Because you don't have to necessarily choose a school. Just like even now with Common Core, you can choose a Christian school or this or that. And so, also another thing is, this one kind of combines budget and schools. I noticed that the Willow campaign was saying that, for school systems, they're not going to cut programs, they're just going to cut, as far as I figured out, is they're just going to cut funding for those programs. So it's like art and music, they'll still have those, but they won't actually be putting too much money towards those. So it's like, okay, so you're just going to have music schools, but you're not going to buy them any new instruments. You're just going to have them. So
would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree because he was very strongly endorsing the STEM program, which mainly focuses on the science and math side of everything. And they said that he still supports the arts and all that, but he definitely encourages kids to still be open to all science and math instead.
Right. And if your budget isn't, if you're cutting back on the budget for that, but you're having those programs encouraged, you're just gonna have, a program that's just kind of, it's not gonna be a quality program that, people will actually learn much out of.
Right. And standardized testing too. If Common Core is all about, kind of conforming everybody to the same mold, and if they're really trying to, advocate for individuals and stuff like that, then, how is standardized testing any different than Common Core in the respect of, promoting individuality in students? It's like the way a student takes a standardized test does not necessarily show, what they can do or the way they work. So
right. And then how do you guys feel about how they made their arguments about the labor agreements, like union versus non-union? How do you guys feel on that?
I feel like the Maple Party really had a good handle on that, because I mean, it's true that right now that labor unions do kind of have a monopoly on the work process. So it's like, okay, if you try to do smaller programs and smaller companies and stuff, then that is, I mean, like they said, $200 less per person.
Yeah.
And it like kind of breaks the monopoly, as in like everyone gets more of a chance for work in, providing more jobs for people in Michigan. So.
Right, yeah. I think all of them had, pretty similar intentions about the unions and, making it free for all workers, or fair for all workers, rather. So.
How do you think?
I agree. Yeah, like I think what they were talking about, they made some really good points, and I agree with the things because it doesn't stop union workers from getting jobs. Still, it just opens more doors for everyone to get jobs.
So between like all the different things that were covered for the debate, I mean, I know like all three of you guys are gonna have like just something to like the just the party that you guys were working with. But who do you think probably did the best like out of the three? Like, or do you think they all pretty much went at the same pace?
I mean, I think that they all, did a good job. They presented well. And I mean, I don't want to say, okay, this one was definitely the best out of the three. I do think that Maple had some really strong points, but then again, they all did. For example, I was not a big fan of Roth's budget idea, just because the whole prisoner thing, but they also had some really good ideas about education, students' rights, and gun control, all that kind of stuff. So I think in that respect, they were pretty well balanced out. So.
Yeah. I think all three of them did pretty well presenting themselves. I don't really think that any of them pulled ahead in regards to, their presentation of their policies.
Yeah, they each had points that they could have done better on, and they each had points that they really excelled at. So there's not one specific, and I just think they all did pretty well.
All right, thank you.